In 1965, a body man in Buffalo, New York, kept cars alive in the worst rust country in America, where the lake-effect snow fell for months, and road salt ate a car from underneath in 2 or 3 winters. His cars did not rot. 20 years old, and the bodies were still solid, while his neighbors dissolved around good engines. His customers thought he had a secret coating. He did not. He had a set of habits, learned from the man before him, and a plain understanding of one fact the whole industry was forgetting. That is number 25 on this list. But the habit underneath all of them, the one that decides whether a car rots or lasts, is number 1. And every one of them still saves a car owner thousands today. Here is the fact he understood, and Detroit chose to ignore. Rust needs 3 things in the same place at the same time: iron, oxygen, and water. Take away any one, and it stops cold. You cannot take the iron from the steel or the oxygen from the air. So the whole war comes down to the one thing you control, the water, and how long it sits against bare metal, while a perfectly good engine goes to the crusher inside a rotted shell. And in exactly the years this mattered most, the industry went the other way. Road salt use rose tenfold between 1950 and 1970, and Detroit answered it with thinner steel and seam-heavy bodies that trapped water like a sponge. By Chrysler's own figures, 1 in 5 cars in the salt states had rust holes after 2 years, and more than half after 4. Cars were rotting out before they were paid off, and many came to believe that was the point. Number 13 kills a spot of surface rust the day it appears, before it becomes a hole. Number 17 is the factory undercoating that was supposed to protect your car, and instead sealed the salt against it and rotted it faster. And number 1, the habit that decided everything, the one his teacher drilled in before he could touch a car, costs nothing. And it is why his cars outlived every other car in that snowbound city. These secrets were never about a magic coating. They were about a man who understood that rust is a slow chemistry, not a curse, and a car is worth keeping if you deny the water its work. Knowing that a good engine under a rotted body is a car thrown away for nothing, and that it did not have to happen, was the hard part. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the 25 lost rust prevention secrets old American mechanics took to the grave. Number 25. Rinsing the salt off the underbody every winter. The cheap wash that stopped the ROT before it started. You ran a hose up under the car through the winter, into the wheel wells and along the frame, and rinsed off the road salt before it could sit and eat. A few minutes broke the one chain rust needs. A driver in Buffalo in 1965 rinsed his underbody after every thaw, because salt dissolved in water becomes an electrolyte that speeds the rusting many times over. The Buffalo mechanic hosed a customer's underbody whenever the car was on his lift. The salt was not the enemy. The enemy was salt and water, left to sit. Number 24, keeping the body drain holes clear, the little slots that decided whether a door rotted. You cleaned out the drain holes along the bottoms of the doors, rockers, and trunk, the slots the factory put there so water could run out. Plugged, they turned every door into a bucket holding water against the steel from inside. A careful owner in 1965 ran a pick through his drains each fall, because doors are built to let water in and drain it out the bottom, and a blocked drain rotted a door from the bottom up, unseen until the metal was gone. The Buffalo mechanic checked the drains on every car he touched, because that was where the rot hid. The door did not rust from getting wet. It rusted because the water could not get out. Number 23, clearing the cowl and trunk channels of debris. The trapped leaves that held water against the metal. You cleared the leaves and grit out of the cowl at the base of the windshield, the trunk gutters, and the channels where panels met. Wet leaves packed into a seam hold moisture against the steel for weeks and rot it from a spot no one ever looks. A tidy driver in 1965 cleaned his cowl every autumn because any low channel that collects debris becomes a damp poultice against bare metal, and a plugged cowl drain rotted the car from inside. The Buffalo mechanic cleared the cowl and trunk channels on any car in for bodywork. The metal did not rot from being thin. It rotted because wet debris sat on it for months. Number 22. Digging the packed mud out of the wheel wells, the salt-soaked cake that never dried. You dug the packed mud and salt out of the inner wheel wells and the lips where it collected, because that cake held salt water against the fender all winter. Clean, the metal dried between storms. Caked, it never dried at all.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us, who still believe a man should be able to keep his own car running. It's the Forgotten Mechanic's Handbook, the old-fashioned car repair secrets our grandfathers used to fix any engine and keep it running for decades. But these skills are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't pay another mechanic ever again. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
A driver in 1965 cleared his wheel arches all winter because packed mud is a sponge that holds salt water against the steel continuously, and the arches were the first place a salt belt car blew out. The Buffalo mechanic cleaned a customer's wheel wells whenever the car was up in winter. The fender did not rot from facing the road. It rotted because the road stuck to it and stayed. Number 21. Touching up a paint chip the day it happened. The pinhole of bare metal that became a crater. You dabbed paint over a stone chip the day you found it, sealing the bare metal before the weather could reach it. Left open, rust creeps under the paint until a pinhole becomes a crater. A proud owner in 1965 kept touch-up in the glove box because rust that starts at a chip spreads under the surrounding paint and lifts it, and a chip ignored one. Winter came back as a blister the size of a coin. The Buffalo mechanic dabbed every chip he spotted before the car left his bay. The chip was not the damage. It was the door the damage walked through. Number 20. Waxing the paint as armor, not shine. The barrier that kept the water off the steel. You waxed the paint for protection more than looks, because wax beads the water off and keeps it from sitting on the finish and reaching metal through every flaw. A careful owner in 1965 waxed twice a year because paint is the first barrier against rust and wax protects the paint. So a waxed finish keeps water moving off instead of soaking in at every chip. The Buffalo mechanic waxed his own car religiously and told every customer to do the same. The wax was not vanity. It was the thinnest armor a car ever wore. Number 19. Coating the inside of the rockers and doors, the hidden cavities where rust was born. You got a coating into the hollow insides of the rockers and doors, the sealed cavities where condensation collected and no paint reached. Those hidden boxes rusted from the inside out, unseen, until the skin bubbled and it was too late. A thorough man in 1965 sprayed a cavity coating up inside the rockers because the inside of a cavity is bare steel that traps moist air, and he had cut open enough rotted ones to know rust started in the dark. The Buffalo mechanic coated the cavities on any car he could, and today would reach for proper cavity wax over the old used oil trick. The rocker did not rot from outside in. It rotted from the hollow no one protected. Number 18. Chasing the leak that soaked the floor pan, the wet carpet that rotted the car from within. You found and sealed the leaks that let water into the cabin and trunk, A bad windshield seal, a plugged drain, a torn weather strip, because water in the floor pan sat under the carpet and rotted the floor out from inside. A car could look clean and have no floor left under the mats. A driver in 1965 pulled his carpet to dry it after any leak because water trapped under carpet with no air is nearly the perfect rust chamber, and a floor is not a panel you simply replace. The Buffalo mechanic hunted a leak to its source whenever a carpet came up damp. The floor did not rot from the road. It rotted from the puddle no one knew was there. Number 17, undercoating right and never trapping the water. The factory coating that rotted cars faster than nothing at all. You undercoated the underbody, but you did it right, over clean, dry, solid metal. Because the one thing worse than no undercoating is bad undercoating. The rubberized coatings the factories sprayed cracked, and then salt water crept in behind them and sat trapped against the steel, rotting the car faster than bare metal would. A knowing owner in 1965 was wary of a cheap undercoat job because once it cracked, it held salt water against the metal and accelerated the very rot it was sold to prevent. The Buffalo mechanic only undercoated metal he had cleaned first and never sprayed over rust. The undercoat did not fail from being thin. It failed because it sealed the enemy inside. Here is something worth sitting with. The men who knew how to stop rust are nearly gone, and they were fighting a battle the industry had quietly decided not to win. In the very years road salt was multiplying, Detroit built cars with thinner steel and seam-heavy bodies that held water in 100 hidden pockets, a generation with an expiration date built into the metal, rotting out in 2 and 3 years while the engine still ran fine. Planned obsolescence was a real and openly discussed strategy, named in books and practiced for decades. And rust was its most effective form, because a man will repair a car that runs badly, but junk one whose floor has fallen out. One car maker even ran a rust warranty its own policy said not to advertise, offered only to those who complained loudest. Those mechanics held a line the manufacturers had abandoned, and they knew it. Number 16, coating the exposed bolts and brackets, the bare fasteners that rusted solid. You wiped grease over the exposed bolts and bare fasteners under the car with your hands so the weather could not seize them. Coated, they turned free years later. Bare, they welded into their holes and sheared off when anyone finally had to touch them. A mechanic in 1965 coated the fasteners on anything he assembled underneath because bare threaded steel in the salt is the surest thing on a car to rust solid, turning a 10-minute job into an afternoon with a drill. The Buffalo mechanic greased the exposed hardware on every car he had up. The bolt did not seize from age. It seized because it was left naked in the salt. Number 15, keeping the whole car clean, the dirt that held moisture like a rag. You kept the car clean, top and bottom, because a film of dirt holds moisture against the paint long after the rain has stopped, and a dirty car stays damp under its own filth for days. A proud owner in 1965 washed his car through the winter, not for looks, but because grime is porous and holds water against the finish, a wet blanket keeping metal damp between rains. The Buffalo mechanic kept his own car clean enough to dry in an hour. The dirt did not look dangerous. It was a wet rag the car could never wring out. Number 14, letting the car dry and never sealing it wet. The warm, closed garage that rusted a car faster. You let the car dry and learned that a wet car shut in a warm, closed garage rusts faster than one left out in the wind. Sealed in with no air, the moisture off a snowy car steams against the metal all night. In the wind, it dries. A driver in 1965 whose garaged car rotted worse than his neighbor's outdoor one learned to crack the door and let the air move because a warm, humid, unventilated space is a rust chamber. The Buffalo mechanic told customers to crack the garage on a wet night, not shut it tight. The garage did not protect the car by being warm. It rotted it by holding the wet in. Number 13. Killing surface rust the day it appeared. The first orange speck that became a hole. The day a spot of surface rust showed, you took it back to bright metal, treated it, primed it, and painted it. Surface rust is not a stain, it is a living reaction that grows outward and down every day it is left alone. A watchful owner in 1965 chased the first orange speck the week he saw it because surface rust spreads under the adjacent paint and pits into the metal, so the cheapest moment to stop it is the day it appears. The Buffalo mechanic ground out a first rust spot the day it was found, never later. The speck was nothing on its own. It became everything by being ignored. Number 12. Sealing the seams and pinch welds. The folded joints where water hid and worked. You worked seam sealer into the folded seams and pinch welds where two panels met, the tight, dark joints impossible to dry, where water wicks in and rust begins unseen. A body man in 1965 resealed the seams on any car he had apart because a pinch weld's capillary gap pulls water in and never lets it out, where salt belt cars split open first. The Buffalo mechanic ran fresh sealer into every seam he opened. The seam did not fail from weakness. It failed because water hid where it could never dry. Number 11. Coating the frame and the suspension, the structure that rusted where no one looked. You coated the frame rails, cross members, and suspension, the structural steel that took the full blast of the road and salt. No one saw the work, but a rotted frame is not a repair, it is the end of the car. A careful owner in 1965 had his frame coated before winter because the frame takes the direct spray off the road and rusts structurally, and a good engine was no use in a car condemned from underneath. The Buffalo mechanic coated the frame on any car meant to be kept. The frame did not rot from weakness. It rotted because it took the worst of the road unguarded. Number 10. Sealing the battery tray against the acid. The shelf the battery quietly ate through. You cleaned and coated the battery tray and bracket because a battery vents a faint acid mist its whole life that eats the bare steel around it, rotting the tray through in a corner nobody checks and dropping a battery into the engine bay. A fleet mechanic in 1965 sealed every tray each spring because a lead-acid battery vents acid vapor continuously onto the tray, and that corner of the engine bay rots even when nothing ever spilled. The Buffalo mechanic sealed the tray whenever a battery was out. The tray did not rot from age. It rotted because acid rained on bare steel for years. Number 9. Guarding the condensation traps in the body, the cold metal that sweated all winter. You watched the places inside the body where cold steel met warm, moist air and sweated, the inside of panels, the trunk lid, the roof skin, and kept them coated so the sweat could not sit. Condensation is water the car makes from thin air, and it rusts from inside just the same. A thorough man in 1965 knew his car made its own moisture in the cold because warm, humid air touching cold metal condenses into water, the way an engine sweats on a cold morning, and cavities rust even without rain. The Buffalo mechanic coated the sweating panels whenever he had an interior apart. The panel did not rot from rain. It rotted from the water the cold air left on it. Here is the part of his story we skipped. The Buffalo mechanic did not invent any of this. He learned it sweeping the floor for an old body man who had fought the salt since before the war and treated rust like a living enemy to be starved. For 2 years, the old man put a cutting tool in the boy's hands and made him open rotted panels and find where the rot had started, over and over, until the boy could see the pattern with his eyes closed, always a place water had sat. "It is never where you think," the old man would say. "It is always where the water stayed." Then one day the boy named the 3 places a fresh car would rot first: the cowl, the rockers, the rear arches, before a speck had shown, and the old man nodded because the boy had learned to see the water instead of the rust. He ran that shop 30 years in the worst salt country in America, and his customers' cars did not rot. Number 8. Keeping dissimilar metals apart. The hidden reaction that ate the joint. You watched the places where 2 different metals touched: a steel bolt in an aluminum part, a chrome clip on a steel panel, and coated them, because dissimilar metals in salt water set up a reaction that eats one away. It is corrosion with a battery inside it, and it works fast. A sharp mechanic in 1965 coated the joints where metals met, because 2 metals with salt water between them form a galvanic cell that corrodes the weaker one, fast, rotting the steel around aluminum trim into lace. The Buffalo mechanic coated every dissimilar metal joint he found. The joint did not rot by accident. 2 metals and salt water made a battery that ate it. Number 7. Coating the bright trim and the low chrome. The pieces the salt spray hit first. You kept a film over the chrome and bright trim, especially the low pieces along the rockers and bumpers that took the salt spray off the road. Pitted chrome could not be brought back, and the rust behind it crept into the panel underneath. A proud owner in 1965 wiped his low trim down all winter because chrome that pits through lets water reach the steel beneath. So failing trim is not only ugly, it becomes a doorway for rust into the body. The Buffalo mechanic coated the low bright work on any car he prepped for winter. The trim did not just dull, it became a wound that let the rust in. Number 6. Storing the car right, off the damp ground. The concrete floor that fed it moisture from below. You stored a car off bare, damp ground, on a barrier or in a ventilated space, because a car on bare earth or damp concrete draws moisture up into itself as long as it sits. Stored wrong, it came out worse than one driven. A man laying up a second car in 1965 put boards under it because bare ground and unsealed concrete wick moisture upward, and a still car sits in a rising column of damp that rusts the underside. The Buffalo mechanic told anyone storing a car to get it off the wet floor and let the AIR move. The stored car did not rust from neglect. It rusted from the damp ground, breathing up into it. Number 5. Fixing a rust spot completely, not painting over it. The blister that came back worse under fresh paint. When you fixed a rust spot, you took it all the way to clean bright metal, treated it, primed it, and only then painted, because rust painted over does not die. It keeps working under the new paint and comes back worse, sealed in with a fresh coat over the top. A body man in 1965 never painted over rust because it keeps reacting under any paint laid over it, so a spot covered instead of cut out was a blister again by spring, larger than before. The Buffalo mechanic took every repair down to bright metal and lost the fast jobs gladly. The paint did not stop the rust. It only hid it while it ate. Number 4. guarding the hidden traps behind the trim, the ROT that grew where no eye ever went. You pulled the trim and moldings now and then and looked behind them, because the places a strip of chrome covered were exactly where water wicked in and rust grew unseen for years before it broke through. What you cannot see is where rust prefers to work. A careful owner in 1965 checked behind his trim because it traps water in a covered channel that never dries and never gets inspected, hiding the worst of the rot until it was too far gone. The Buffalo mechanic pulled the trim on any car he was keeping honest. The rust did not start in the open. It started where the trim hid it. Number 3. Reading where the water would sit. The trained eye that saw the rot before it started. You learned to look at a car and see, before a speck had shown, exactly where rust would begin. The low seams, the plugged drains, the hidden cavities, the traps where water could not escape. Rust is not random. It starts where water sits, and water sits in a short, predictable list of places on any car ever built. The Buffalo mechanic could lay his hands on the 3 spots a new car would rot first, because the old man had trained his eye on 1,000 rotted bodies until the map of the water was plain. He taught his customers the same short list, so a man could guard his own car at the handful of places that mattered. He never guarded the wrong spot and never missed the right one. Number 2. The seasonal round with a rag and a coating. The standing appointment that kept the water beaten. Twice a year, going into winter and coming out, you went over the whole car with your hands. The drains, the seams, the cavities, the trim, the frame, clearing, coating, sealing, drying. It was not a repair. It was a standing appointment with the metal, an afternoon that kept rust from ever getting the months of sitting water it needed to win. The Buffalo mechanic did this to his own car every spring and fall and taught the boy who swept his floor that the round was the whole job. Rust never won in a day, he said. It won over a wet season nobody interrupted, and the round was how you interrupted it. The body shop fixed the rot after it won. He beat it twice a year before it began. Number 1. Never letting the water sit and soak. That is all. And it is what this whole list has circled from the first minute. Every secret on this list was one thing, made specific. Keep the water moving and never let it sit against bare metal long enough to work. Rinse it off, drain it out, dry it, coat the metal, clear the traps. You cannot take the iron from the steel or the oxygen from the air, so you deny rust the only thing left, the standing water and the time it needs. The Buffalo mechanic had done this since the winter the old man taught him to see the water instead of the rust. It was the first thing his teacher drilled in, and the last thing he taught the boy who took over the shop. Every other secret here was only this one principle, aimed at one more place the water tried to sit. Iron, oxygen, water, and time. Rust needs all 4, and the only one you can take away is the water. That has not changed since 1965, and it will not tomorrow. Number 1 is not a product, and it is not a trick. It is a principle. Keep the water moving, and the rust never gets the days of sitting. It needs to begin. None of these secrets needed a magic coating or a shelf of bottles. They needed a rag, a hose, a can of sealer, and a man who understood that rust only wins when water is allowed to sit. He rinsed the salt, cleared the drains, sealed the seams, and coated the cavities, and his cars stayed solid for decades in a city that dissolved everyone else's. A few dollars of care, twice a year, saved his customers their cars. Here is what makes it sting. In the years those habits mattered most, the industry built cars to rot, thinner steel, and water-trapping seams in the age of salt that was 10 times heavier, until by one maker's own count, more than half the cars in the salt states had rust holes in 4 years. Rust, not failure, drove people to the showroom because a man will fix an engine but junk a car with no floor. When those mechanics retired, the knowledge went with them. We did not lose these secrets because they stopped working. Everyone still works today on the car in your driveway, and salt still rusts steel exactly as it did in 1965. What we lost was the man who knew where the water hid, and the eye that could see the rot before it started. We lost the old body man in Buffalo who cut open a rotted panel, put his hand on the spot where the water had sat, and said, "It is never where you think, it is always where the water stayed." The boy learned to see the water and kept a Salt Belt city's cars whole for 30 years. And on his last day, he set a rag and a can of sealer in a new boy's hands, pointed at the cowl, the rockers, and the rear arches of the car on the lift, and told him where the water would try to sit.